Hot. And 3, 2.
So I feel like I should jump into song and dance or something. Thank you for coming. We appreciate your time. I know you're all very busy. We will try to keep this to about an hour. So I will jump in and interrupt you here and there, but at the end I'll set aside some time for you to do like a closing statement just in case there's something we didn't get to. And feel free to converse among yourselves. We're casual. Jump in wherever you see fit. I just want to start with each of you taking a minute, please, and just 1 minute telling us who you are, what party you're with, since we have a couple that most of our viewers are probably not familiar with, and why you think you're best suited for Illinois Comptroller. And we'll start with you, Tim.
Okay. My name is Tim Curtin. I am the candidate from the Illinois Green Party for State Comptroller. Reason I'm running is I had an opportunity to talk to 53,000 people who signed our petition, and the people in our state are hopping mad. I asked them a simple question. The question was this: are you satisfied with the direction of state government? People grabbed the petition. They're mad, they're angry with the status quo. So that is why I am running.
Thank you.
I'm Leslie Munger. I'm the the incumbent comptroller. I'm the Republican candidate for comptroller. I'm running for the remaining 2 years of the 4-year term to really continue a lot of what I've tried to do the last couple of years in office, to stand up for social services in the state and ensure that the most vulnerable get the help that they need, to continue to be a loud voice for taxpayers all around the state on the critical need to bring fiscal responsibility to our state. Our state, it is a fiscal crisis. We have $8 billion in bills right now. We don't have the money to pay. We have unfunded pension liabilities that are $115 billion and growing. We need to begin to live within our means. I have spent my 19 months in office traveling the state, educating people, speaking out for the need to work together to get a balanced budget in place, that the governor and the legislature need to lock arms and get this done. And I would like to continue being the loud voice for taxpayers in the state. My record, I believe, shows that I've earned another 2 years in office.
Thank you. I am Susana Mendoza, the Democratic nominee for Illinois Comptroller, and I'm running for this position because I believe that it is the most important position that many people have never heard of. Strong internal controls, oversight, accountability, and compliance with existing and established accounting methods are very important to the Office of the Comptroller. Transparency is important too, but without the appropriate levels of accountability, it's frankly meaningless. The Comptroller is in a unique position today to broker fiscal stewardship across all levels in the state of Illinois. And I'll be an independent, truth-telling fiscal watchdog for the state that will also work very hard to enhance the overall internal control environment of the state of Illinois so that we can be more productive, work more efficiently, and more effectively. And speaking of operating more effectively and efficiently, I have a history of doing that. Over the last 10 years as a state legislator, but also over the last 5 years as the city clerk of the city of Chicago, running the second largest office in the city. I've taken an office that was once seen as a do-nothing drag on taxpayer office and turned it into what is now seen as a model in government efficiency. I've done more with less. I've streamlined services and operations. I've eliminated the hours-long lines at City Hall. I've done it with 10% less payroll. I've cut my overtime by 70%. I've come in under budget every single year that I've been clerk. And we've generated over $30 million in new revenues for the city of Chicago without asking taxpayers to pay more. And I'm also very proud of my partisan record as a legislator and an elected official. And I look forward to bringing a unique leadership and guidance that is not partisan, but is just wanting to get the job done, which has been my history all along. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Claire Ball. I am the Libertarian candidate for Illinois Comptroller. I'm running because in the 197-year history of Illinois, way back when we were a territory, the Office of the Comptroller, and even before it was called State Comptroller, we have never had an accountant run. We've never had an accountant in that office. And I think that needs to end. The Office of the Comptroller is record keeping and payment authorization for the state. The private sector equivalent would be a CFO. And when was the last time you heard of Google hiring a lawyer to balance their books? I am an accountant. I have over 10 years experience in the field. I have bachelor's and master's degrees in accounting and finance. I just this week passed my CPA, so I'm very excited about that. Thank you. And I want to do the job of controller. I want to increase transparency. I want to get our reporting under control. We are over a year behind normally in getting our financial reports out, and I'd like to change that. If a private sector company can do it within 90 days, the state government should be able to do it within 180 days. And I think independence, when I think independence, I think Libertarian Party. Who better to look over the books of the Republicans and the Democrats than a Libertarian? Thank you.
Thank you. Both of the Democratic and Republican candidates, you have sort of taken shots at each other over your connections to some of the state's most powerful politicians. Comptroller Munger, your Democratic opponent, says that because you've been appointed by Governor Bruce Rauner, he has tremendous influence over your office. Could you address those concerns, please?
Yes, and actually, before I even address that, I reject the notion that this is a proxy war. I believe that we are all here, all four of us, with our own records of accomplishment, with our own qualifications, that we should be judged for our role as comptroller, not based on who might have put us in these positions, but what we actually have done. I actually have a strong record of independence in my role. I stood up 2 weeks, it's true the governor appointed me, but 2 weeks into my job, I had to stand up against the governor when he asked me to withhold fair share union dues from the payroll and to transfer those. I had to tell him no. That was not popular with the governor, believe me, I heard about it, and with a lot of people in my party. But it was the right thing to do, it was the lawful thing to do. I stood up, and it goes beyond just the governor, actually. I stood up to the Attorney General when I asked her to go get a court order to allow me to pay state employees, and she sued me to stop. I took my own lawyer into court and won that court case, and it is what is allowing us to pay state employees so we do not incur treble damages on the payroll that we would see under federal labor laws. I stood up to the legislature when I put all of our state elected official payroll, mine included, in line with the rest of the state's bills. I have heard from people on both sides of the aisle over and over again on how difficult it is. But yet I think it's the right thing to do, that those of us who are sent to serve the people of the state are not prioritized over those whose salaries are paying our tax dollars. And frankly, whose tax dollars are paying our salaries. And frankly, I heard a lot from the governor who told me I shouldn't pay anyone because they hadn't done their job. And I told him, no, I have to keep people in line because it would be illegal to stop paying. And so I've shown, I think, a number of times where I've had to stand up to my own party and have been independent. I am here on my own record. I have a master's in business from Northwestern. I spent 25 years in the private sector running an $800 million business. I am new to state government, but I bring to this role not only my business background, but a very long record of helping social services. I'm a former board of directors member with social services in my area. And I've spent a lot of my time as comptroller, as I mentioned in my opening, really working with them to help them navigate through this.
Are there any parts of the governor's agenda that you have fought against?
Absolutely. I think I've been a pretty vocal advocate on social service payments. I have gone last fall, actually. We had to go to the governor's staff and figure out how to get some of the payments made that were not apparently covered under some of the court orders. It had to do with early intervention payments to social service providers where they had not been paid since last March because of the long-time practice of shifting part of the state's bills from one last quarter of the year into the next quarter, into the new year, and those people could not get paid because we did not have a budget. And so we worked closely and worked to try and figure out how to get them legally paid under the existing court orders. It kept them open. When there was a situation where we had some people who were in Wisconsin, but Illinois residents not covered under some of the payments that we could make. There was a lot actually written in the Sun-Times about this. I went to bat for the families with the governor's office. I was unsuccessful, but I was a pretty vocal advocate for why we should be paying those people. And I've been on the phone a number of times with the secretary of the agencies involved in helping various people in social services try and get payments out. I do not agree with the way we're handling social services right now.
Okay, we'll get to that, but you, I think, called her a lapdog for the governor, so what is your evidence that she is not independent of the governor's office?
Well, I certainly, first of all, I believe that she has not stood up to Governor Rauner. The one time that she made mention to was about 2 weeks into her job, and I feel it was a big surprise to even the governor that she said the position that she took, and it was based on the correct legal opinion that she should have done, which was with right-to-work legislation type stuff. Having said that, her campaign chairman is the actual mayor who passed right-to-work legislation, the only piece of right-to-work legislation in the entire state of Illinois to pass, and it happens to be in her own hometown. One of the central issues of Governor Rauner's turnaround agenda. She's not fought against the turnaround agenda, she's championed the turnaround agenda. And to actually sit here and say that she is concerned the way that she implied right now with social services, I frankly just don't believe it, because it shouldn't take a newspaper article, which is how we found out about this Wisconsin-based social service issue, to get her to act and take care of that family. They had to resort to talking to the media, and the media had to write a story before it was time for the comptroller to personally get involved. Also, on top of that, to talk about her priority for social services and certainly developmentally disabled communities that she mentioned right now, she had to be not just sued, not just losing court, but had to be pretty much threatened with contempt of court before releasing payments to those most vulnerable populations. And I find that egregious. There's no...
Do you not, I mean,
Yeah.
even dating back to 2007, 2008, when you were there,
Sure.
Dan Hines, comptroller, was railing against the legislature for continually passing budgets that were structurally deficit-ridden, and social service providers were being squeezed. I mean, that was a story when you were down there too.
Yeah, it was, but guess what? Dan Hines was never threatened with contempt of court before releasing payments to the most vulnerable in this state. Neither was Judy Bartopinka. Neither was any comptroller that has ever served in the state of Illinois.
You reject the notion that the state's out of money?
Not at
That
all.
$10 billion
I do
budget?
not, and that's why this office is so important, because there is very little money, and so you have to be able to prioritize what's most important in this state. And I would argue that once you lose that court case and the court tells you to pay the bills to the most vulnerable in our state, you should be happy and excited to do it, not wait another 2 or 3 months before you're threatened with going to jail before releasing payments. And that's the
I'd like to
difference.
jump in
This
here.
is an
There's
issue of
just a lot of things
prioritizing.
that are false, actually, that she's just talking
So
about.
were you
First
not?
First of all, you referenced that my campaign manager, it was someone, the mayor of Lincolnshire, who is right to work.
Elizabeth Brandt.
She is not my current campaign manager.
She's your campaign chairman listed on your paperwork. So unless if your
She
paperwork is not up to
She
date.
was my campaign manager when I ran for state representative several years ago. She is not my current campaign manager.
Did you speak out against her
I had
position on
nothing-
right to work?
So I have nothing to do with any of the things going on in Lincolnshire.
Of
I've
course
been traveling
not.
all over the
You have
state.
nothing to do with what the governor's doing either. I'm sorry,
Secondly,
it's
with
just-
respect,
Thank
you got it.
secondly, respect with contempt of court. Something that I think everyone should understand about the comptroller's office, and clearly maybe you do not, is that I cannot pay a bill without a voucher in my hand. I cannot release tax dollars without a voucher. The court ordered payment to the social services about a year ago. We worked hard. We did not have the voucher in our hands until late in the day the payment was due. Once we got the voucher, we turned the payment around within 24 hours. It was paid on the next business day. When we went back into court, we were not held in contempt. We must have the voucher. Until I get that, there's nothing I can do on that. I have been a strong advocate for social services ever since I was appointed to this office. I have actually received awards from social services. One of the largest ones has nominated me for the elected official of the year.
So what did you do when all of these stories were rolling out about Lutheran social services and Catholic charities?
Right.
What did
So-
you do specifically to try to
So
speed payment to them?
one of the things that I can do, so in the comptroller's office, I have very little leverage actually as to what we can do with respect to paying bills. I've tried to pay them on a first in, first out basis because it benefits the state to pay things as quickly as we can in order. The longer a bill is in-house, it earns 1% a month interest after 90 days. So I pay them in order. But what I have done through this budget crisis is to be in constant contact with social services all around the state. I pull, when they have a problem, they can't meet a payroll, they're about to shutter a program, if there was a legal mechanism to pay them, we did that. They call us, or we knew of it through our outreach to their offices. We find a voucher in the pile of vouchers, we pull it up to the front and get them paid. I would ask you to contact social services all around the state and ask them how it has been working with our office. If we could legally pay them, and there I will admit our number that we could not release payments to because we've been running our state for the last year plus with no budget, and there are things that are not covered under law, covered under court orders or consent decrees. But if we could legally make a payment, we did. I was an advocate for domestic violence shelters, which are part of the organizations.
Let me hit the pause button here and let the two of you jump in. What would you have done differently in this crisis with no budget and having to shuffle resources to get payments to social service providers?
Well, first off, social service providers would be at the top of my list. What I want to do is establish a table of priority, and list out transparency being forefront here, because she's right that the controller's office does not have a lot of wiggle room when there's no money. But I want to establish a table of priority that says in times of crunch, here are the broad categories of individuals for whom payments should be received first. Mandated payments, payments for social services, those who are in the most need and rely the most on our dollars would be at the top of that list.
Who's getting paid now, who shouldn't be?
That's the question.
That is the question.
There is zero transparency in this regard.
That's the question, we don't know. There is very little going on. There's very little tracking. There's very little just transparency in who's getting paid and why they're getting paid. The why behind a decision is just as important as the decision itself. You need to be able to lay out, this person got paid, this person got paid, this person got paid, and be able to justify why they got paid over others, which is what I want to do.
Yes. I think I'm the only one that rejects the notion here that we have a fixed box of money and we can't do anything about it. I think it's absurd. It's interesting to me that both parties sit tight and refuse to balance a budget. As far as I'm concerned, it's a plague on both of them. Now, I looked at it. I've looked at the budget. It seems to me the obvious solution is more revenue. You have to have more revenue. That's interesting to me. House Bill 106 has been there for years. It was put in by State Representative Mary Flowers, financial transactions tax. What's happened to it? No public hearings. It could raise $10 to $12 billion by taxing the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, Board of Trade Options.
What can you do as comptroller, though, to get
Okay,
legislation?
I would be an advocate for people, okay? What's
Be an
missing?
advocate for getting
For
more
change,
revenue for the state.
absolutely. What needs to happen is we need more money, okay? If we have more money, we can get a balanced budget. We can stop violating the state constitution. It's outrageous that both parties sit there. Governor Rauner had proposed, what do they call it? Right to work by county. It's illegal under federal law. You can't take a vote by county to have right to work. It's a matter for the entire state to vote on. People should know that. So he has proposed something that's absolutely impossible, and that's how he said he'd work with the Democrats. The Democrats, both parties, have passed what I would consider a fake budget. How long does it last? It ends right after the election. What an incredible surprise. It doesn't surprise me a bit. Nobody's doing anything to balance the budget. I would be a strong advocate for change in that office. That's why people sign my petition.
Should you be running for governor?
If it was open, I would. I would. Unfortunately, the only state office is comptroller. But we have to fight to change the status quo. If we don't, no matter which, I'm assuming I won't get elected. I think I should. But if the Democrat or the Republican get elected, I don't see anything is going to resolve the problem that we have inherited.
Okay, let me let you jump back in.
Can
on
I
the social
just
service.
address the lack of transparency, so-called lack of transparency in paying of the state's bills? First of all, as I mentioned earlier, and I've followed this ever since I've been on comptroller, I pay bills on a first in, first out basis. You can go to my website, The Ledger. It is all right there online. And in fact, one of the things that I did this past year was improve the transparency in the office by updating the Ledger, updating my website, making it actually much more user-friendly and easy to
So
navigate.
do you not have certain cases where you do expedite payment for,
So-
what are they called, crisis?
Yeah, so I pay bills as they come in line. There are a number of exceptions, and we do pull up payments. We pay up payments that have to be made on certain pay dates. Examples of that would be interest on the debt payments, so we don't default on our bonds. Pension payments that need to be contributions in the pension fund, so those pension checks can go out on a timely basis. The general state aid payments to schools have to be made on certain dates. The salaries for state employees have to be run on certain timetables. So those payments, whether they are in line, wherever they are, those get paid on time and we pull those up. And then the other thing we do is we go through, and I've put this in place for specific hardship cases, to pull up vouchers that can legally be paid from wherever they are to help keep various services open. We've done this in some cases for small businesses that provide services to the state. For example, this past year we were unable to do it because they weren't covered under any of the legal court orders, but prior to that, if they were a vendor for food, for example, for a correctional center, and we were months and months behind in paying them, and they couldn't make their next delivery because they didn't have the money to buy their materials, we would pull up their payment and get them paid so they could continue their service. So certain hardship cases, but predominantly those fall in the area of social services.
So I want to get back to some of your claims. So do you think that there has been some effort to purposely starve some of these groups, or you're dealing with kind of triage every day with your comptroller? So
Sure. But it would be
what are you
helpful, so
suggesting?
here's what I'm suggesting is that we have never been in the situation that we've been in until now. So we, for the last 20 plus years, have had 4 Republican governors, 2 Democratic governors in the time frame that we have now. So the problems that were created by the state, they existed, but certainly this governor was supposed to fix them when he got into office, and he's failed miserably at that. By every account that's measurable, we are worse off today than we were before Comptroller Munger and Governor Rauner. And if we had an independent, truth-telling fiscal watchdog in the governor's office, then she'd be standing up to him, not championing his agenda, but actually fighting against it and telling the story of how those numbers actually reflect a story about the people of the state of Illinois. And while she talks about, or we can talk all day until we're blue in the face about who's been paid and what, that's just, I'll say like Ronald Reagan, trust but verify. You can't verify. As a taxpayer, we can go to the website, and it's very limited what you can actually find. Even the treasurer of the state of Illinois, Mike Frericks, had difficulty finding out who she paid when, right? It's not just about the social service provider that she paid, but who she paid before she actually paid the social service providers. And I think that says how we choose as comptroller to prioritize what's important in this state.
Well, that's a pretty easy accusation to throw out, but let's hear the specifics. Who got paid, who shouldn't have gotten
Right,
paid?
I'd like to know.
Well,
I think
I'd like to ask
Illinoisans
you.
deserve to know.
Well, just
I don't know because
you're suggesting impropriety in order of payment. Could you please back that up?
I'm asking, well, I'm not asking, I'm suggesting that it's impossible to know how she paid because she doesn't make that transparent. And as comptroller of the state of Illinois, I should be able to go on your website and see exactly who was paid in what order, and you
Shouldn't
cannot.
everybody be paid within a 30-day bill cycle like Indiana and all these other states? And do you acknowledge at all why we're having this conversation?
We're having this conversation because we've got 2 years without a budget.
Right,
And
and the Democratic majority, of which you were once part of,
Uh-huh.
for the past 3 years, left knowingly with an unbalanced budget. The first year they passed
so
a
the
budget
governor of
that
the
lasted
state
6
of
months.
Illinois
The
has been in
second
office
year
for
was
2
$4 million.
years.
Yes.
Let me interject here, right? Please, if you don't mind. So the governor of the state of Illinois has been in office for 2 years. Comptroller Munger has been appointed for the last 2 years. Never close enough. Never in the history of our state have we gone without a budget until now. The only new variable to this equation is the current administration. And I think there's something to be said about that.
Same
So
question
he
as
should
to
assign
Mr.
the budget
Curtin.
that was.
To who?
Should you be, the same question as the one to Mr. Curtin. Shouldn't you be running for governor?
No, I'm running to be an independent watchdog and fiscal advocate for the people of the state of Illinois and actually stand up not just to the governor, but to leaders of my own party when that's necessary to do, because I've had a history of doing that. So for the 10 years that I was in the legislature, first of all, I got there by running against the speaker's candidate. So the first time that I ran, I lost. The second time, he doubled down against me. and I won. Not with 55 votes, but with 55% of the vote. And I've been a very independent Democrat my entire tenure. I was one of the champions against Governor Blagojevich before it was popular to be against Governor Blagojevich. I helped chair the impeachment committee. I was one of the only people, one of two Democrats, entire Democrats, to stand up to the seedy appointment of of Senator Roland Burris that you guys even commended me for at the time, because I show independence when it's necessary. Not just to fight against the opposite party. I work incredibly well with the opposite party. That's what I've been so proud of over 15 years in office, to have amazing relationships on both sides of the aisle. I've been supported by Democrats and Republicans and people in between, because I want to represent everyone in this state. But being independent is more than just saying it. I've proven it over my lifetime in politics, serving the public, and I've been very proud of that. And so should I go to Springfield as your next comptroller, I'm looking forward to working with everyone over there. I may be objecting to some of the policies that we hear today or that I'm talking about with Governor Rauner, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to be able to work with him across the aisle. I've stood up to people in my own party, in the opposite party, but at the end of the day have always been able to figure out a way to move the ball forward on behalf of the people of this state. And that's what you need during a pressure cooker of a state that we're in.
Can I just jump in here?
I work best under pressure, and this is a pressure situation that we're in, and you need somebody who actually has a record of being able to work across the aisle and not just follow whatever orders are coming out of the governor's office, which to me seems clear that that's the case today.
You know, I really like to jump in here, because the problems that we have today in our state, the $8 billion of bills, the $115 billion of unfunded pension liabilities, these are not a new problem. These are not worse than they had ever been before. These started back in 2001 when we first began the practice of passing unbalanced budgets by using accounting gimmicks to shift bills from one year into the next, by taking holidays on pension payments, by borrowing against the pension fund. My opponent here on my left was in the legislature from 2001 through for the next 10 years. She has her fingerprints all over this. She voted for every one of the tax increases, the unbalanced budgets, the pension holidays, the borrowing against the pension funds. She claims to be independent because she maybe once stood up to Speaker Madigan way back before she was first elected. She voted for every one of his budgets. She voted with him to help Governor Blagojevich in the unfunded, in the pension, taking the pension holiday. She voted with Governor Quinn to give CPS a $1 billion pension holiday. The pension problem and the lack of funding is killing our state right now. We should have pension expense in our state on an annual basis of about $2 billion. Our pension expense this year is approaching, it's about $8.5 to $9 billion when we figure in the cost of the debt. It's over a quarter of our state's budget. It is that expense is crowding out funding for social services, for education, for all the other important things in our state, and it is because my opponent was there. She voted for it. She was complicit. She stood with her party. She did not stand up and support the people of Illinois.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that there's a big difference between theory and practicality. And when you're there and you're supporting things like social services, investing in CPS or in education across the board, you have to take votes that provide funding for that. So while I believe in providing resources to groups, you have been busy slashing them. So as I travel the state of Illinois, and I talk to working men and women, and I talk to people with disabilities, parents who have children with autism, they're not saying the same story you are about giving you awards. They're talking about having the opportunity to vote on November 8th to change the current status quo. So I'm proud of my record in the legislature, working on behalf of hardworking men and women, investing in schools, not calling them crumbling prisons, not calling teachers illiterate, investing in the opportunity for teachers to. The governor has, and she has not spoken against it one time.
I stand here on my own record.
Well, he certainly didn't appoint me to an office that, and I've stood up. As I said, no, you shouldn't, but guess what? I've stood up every time.
If I can ask you sort of repeat yourself here.
Yes.
If I can ask you just slow down. When we go back and check the budget votes, how many of the budgets did you vote against? In the legislature?
I voted for the budgets because it was the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do.
Budgets were, there was not enough money to pay what you were giving away. How could you do that?
It was the right thing to do to pass a budget and pay for our schools, pay for our pensions. I'm not the one who postponed the pension payment. That was Comptroller Munger. It wasn't Comptroller. Excuse me?
Those budgets didn't. Those budgets were serially unbalanced. This is what we're trying to get to.
Right.
You are talking about being independent. That's fine.
Yes.
Can you please help us with why you were voting for unbalanced budgets?
it was important to balance the budget, and we did. We did balance the budget. We did pay for schools. We did provide social service funding.
You didn't balance.
So when have we ever been 10 billion in the hole or close to that, except for now?
10 billion.
We're
under
8 billion
Governor
now.
Quinn.
We'll be
It was
there by
10
election
billion.
day.
It was 10 billion under Governor Quinn when you voted
You should
to
talk
raise
to
our
legislative
taxes.
leaders about that, but you're not helping me with, you were voting for budgets. You talked about all the things you wanted to give money to, that's great, but the revenue wasn't gonna be there.
You gotta have
Why
money
were
to
you
write
voting,
the taxes.
please, Ms. Munger, why were you voting for those unbalanced budgets?
We did balance the budget
You're
every
asking to be
year.
our tech
So
leader.
we did.
Please.
I mean, 2 of those
How do we-
years were complete pension holidays. The General Assembly skipped 2 years of paying into the pension fund at all.
And then I voted for legislation that would prohibit skipping those pension payments. But unfortunately, our current comptroller went ahead and postponed the pension payment, and it resulted in a negative outlook rating from Moody's. So these things have consequences. We set things in place, and the reality of it is that only as of now, these last 2 years, even by Cranes, which is fiscal conservative paper, have they agreed that everything that we see in the state of Illinois now is worse off than it ever has been before. So how is that different?
You're saying the 10 budgets you voted for were balanced budgets. Is that what you're, and that?
The 10 budgets that I voted for provided the
It's a simple
services at
yes-
the,
It's a simple yes or no.
I believe
Were
they-
the budgets balanced or were they not, and did they fund the pensions?
they did not fund the pensions.
But you voted
But
for them.
they allowed for us to get to funding the pensions. And I believe that, yes, we haven't funded them yet. And I'm one who believes that we absolutely need to reform pensions in the state of Illinois. So,
What
every
budget
pension
payment, what
payment.
budget payment hasn't been made?
no, I'm saying that we postponed the pension payments during the crisis.
No, we did not. We've made, under the law, I need to make the
Yes,
full
the
pension payment within
legislation.
a
He's
year.
talking about the legislation.
Oh, you.
I'm saying that you went ahead and delayed payment on the pension payment that was required to be done by law. Yes, you did.
No.
And
No, I
Moody's
did not.
downgraded
The
it.
law requirement requires me to make the payment within a year. I have been making the payment every month. In November last year, we were frankly out of money. It is our lowest revenue month, and I could not make all the court order payments, the salary payments, the education payments, and still pay the pension, make the contribution to the pension fund on that same date. But I'm required to do it within the year, and as a reminder, Comptroller Dan Hines usually saved the entire payment until the end of the fiscal year. I've been making it monthly. We made up that pension payment in April. We made 2 pension payments in April. The pension contributions are fully funded. We're fully funded for 2016, and we have made all of them so far in both July and August this year. We had to shift one later. It was not anything that was against the law. It's actually well within the law, and it had to do with cash management because we are out of money.
Okay,
Because
let me
we,
just-
And it did result in a negative outlook.
There are other
Down.
that is
candidates
not-
here.
It did.
The no budget in the state is
And again, the no budget that is a result of
It is
having a
led
new
by your
administration that for
Excuse
the
me.
first time in history is happening under
Excuse
Governor
me.
Bonner and
Your
Comptroller
party
Munger.
controls the legislature.
That's not true. Well, guess what? Our party's not the governor. And the governor is responsible for introducing a budget as well and working with the legislature and not holding it hostage to his turnaround agenda items.
Can't start
So
with a
things
budget
that,
that's $5
that's
billion
absolutely
down.
wrong.
Okay, let me, Tim's raising his hand. So let me
Thank
let
you.
him
Sorry,
in.
Tim.
Well, it's interesting to me to listen to both parties because both parties have played tricks on pensions. The last Democratic governor attempted to take pensions from public employees, and he had to be sued. Without that lawsuit, the last Democratic governor would have stolen pensions.
Stolen?
That's, yeah.
Stolen?
He attempted,
You attempted-
without negotiations from the Public Employees Union.
They were at the table the whole time.
Well, all right.
They're always at the
But he
table.
went to court. The unions had to sue him in order to stop the pensions from being taken. That's a fact. Right, I think it was yesterday, Governor Rauner went to the teachers' retirement system and begged them, don't reduce from 7.5% to 7% how you do your accounting. Why? Because the governor didn't want another 200 to 300 million in debt.
Okay,
So that I've got one other thing.
Okay.
Now, part of the job of the comptroller, if you look at them, is to look and to give advice on local government, okay, and how local government is acting. Now, I listened to Mrs. Mendoza talk about CPS and funding for Chicago public schools. The fact of the matter is, the person you work for, Rahm Emanuel.
I don't work for him.
Okay, well,
Sorry, I work-
as far as I'm concerned, you're part of the Emanuel administration. Okay, put it that way. The Emanuel administration is hiring attorneys, borrowing money. Why? I was at a meeting of the Chicago Teachers Union. It is the teacher's opinion that he is doing that to try and not settle a contract.
Okay, we're getting way off.
Well,
track.
all right.
I don't want to talk
Okay.
about the CPS.
Okay.
I want to let
All right.
Thank
Ms.
you.
Ball jump in and then.
Thank you. I actually wanted to bring it back around to the Office of the Comptroller. I just wanted to say that the Office of the Comptroller is not a legislative office. The office handles record keeping and payment authorization for the state. These are accounting functions. There should not be politics in these accounting functions. Yes, it's government. Yes, there will be politics in there, but this is exactly why you need someone who is of an accounting mindset and not a political mindset, looking over the books. I want to dig into the books. I want to bring us around on our financial reporting, and I think that, as Tim was saying, one of the duties of the Comptroller's office is to offer advice. Let's look at the lower levels of government reporting, again, from a financial perspective. When we can look at these things more from a financial perspective, more the way that we require publicly traded companies to look at these things, I think that you're going to see a lot more areas where we can get consensus from both sides on proper decision-making that's best for the state, that's best for the people.
Ms. Ball, as I think the only CPA in the room, are you aware of any impropriety in the ordinal nature of payments that are being made in what you've seen? Are there things you would have paid in different order?
It's tough to say because I'm not in that role. But I do want to say that it's not transparent enough from an accounting perspective, and I want to bring more transparency to that role. There are things that I question, things that have come out in the news that have been reported by all sorts of news sources, but I don't want to say yes, this must be fraud, because I'm not looking at the hard data. I'm not looking at the hard facts. This must be something that things that are questionable. They should be dug into more, but I can't say here and now what those might be.
Can I just make a comment on that? First of all, with respect to the overall payments in our office, we are audited by the Auditor General in the state of Illinois. The only areas that we have ever, and this goes well before my time in office, been flagged on, is the length of time it takes for us to produce our financial reports, and it relates to the fact that we have accounting systems in our state financial systems that are decades old, that are still programmed in COBOL. It is very difficult to get.
Didn't you spend a lot of money updating the systems
So-
when you got in?
So it's a very large project. We began within a few months of me taking office. We worked with the governor's CIO. We purchased software, which is not a lot of money, to begin the project. We started a pilot a year ago in July. We roll out the first phase of that pilot July next year. So it's not up and running yet, but it is in process. And actually it's something that people have tried for a very, very long time, several decades to get updated. But I took it on and we're getting it going. It will save our state $500 million annually. The total cost to bring this up and have it ready over 5 years is $250 million. It saves $500 million annually, so it pays out in 6 months. The cost that we invested in the software was in the neighborhood of about $50 million, and it was paid for under existing funds in the fiscal 15 budget.
So when you ran for, I think your state rep seat, but also when you were appointed to this seat, you talked about the need to combine treasurer and comptroller, and we're going to get on that right away. I haven't seen anything.
Yeah.
Why?
I'm a big fan. Well, so the big issue with combining the two offices is really getting buy-in from the legislature, because it requires a constitutional amendment.
Well, it requires a constitutional amendment to actually push it forward, but you could be doing things, just you and Frericks, sharing receptionists, sharing materials, you could be doing some of that, and you haven't been, why not?
Well, we haven't been, but I did cut my own office budget 10%. I actually have the lowest headcount right now in comptroller office history. And I turned $1.5 million back to the taxpayers of Illinois in my first 6 months in office. Even though we don't have a budget, I ran my office at that level all last year, so I have a total savings so far in office of about $4 million.
Didn't you ask for considerably more though in FY17?
No, I actually asked for less. I am the only officer in the state, other than the governor's office, to ask for less money.
For not just your employee, people directly under you, but your entire operation, you're saying?
My entire operation is less. The other officers went up. The governor's office and my office are the only ones that actually asked for less money. And actually, I had over-delivered on that. Originally, I thought we would be able to save about $1 million. Our first 6 months, we saved $1.5 million.
You want to jump in on?
Yeah, I mean,
how you
well,
run your office?
Sure, that's something that I have a particular expertise in. Number one is managing systems. You have all seen over the last 5 years how I've completely taken an office that had 3-hour-long waits plus that time for people to just simply go pay a tax. And we've eliminated the lines. We've invested in technology. Technology is something that I'm not afraid of. I actually embrace it. I would say that the city clerk's office in the city of Chicago is probably the most tech-savvy office in the country. We've received awards for our Bright Idea Award from Harvard Kennedy School of Business. And most importantly, just in a matter of 5 years, I've taken a 105-year-old system that had always sold stickers in the month of June and transitioned the entire city of Chicago away from that, moving them off of this nightmare of a situation into a streamlined system where we now have 0 lines. I mean, maybe at most a 10-minute wait on a Friday before they're due. We've also done so by voluntarily coming in under budget every year that I've been clerk. I'm the only agency that can say that in the entire city of Chicago. We are an independently elected office. And at that, over the last 5 years, like I said, we've cut our budget every year. We've reduced our overtime by over 70% across the board. I've generated over $30 million in new revenues for the city of Chicago without asking taxpayers to pay more for their stickers. We have really produced amazing results for the city. And like I said, the Civic Federation, when I first started that very first year in office, they came out with their report saying that we should eliminate the clerk's office and that it should be folded into the mayor's office. But at the time, I ran on a platform of being an independent steward for Chicago taxpayers and that there was a good need for that office. And we've taken it from an office that the Civic Federation said get rid of to having them ask me to give their remarks at their luncheon last year. So they've come full circle, and there's no one right now looking at the city clerk's office as anything other than exempling government efficiency. And so that's the kind of expertise that I can bring into the Illinois Comptroller's office. I believe that strong fiscal controls, internal controls, are incredibly important, that we also have this ability to oversee local governments that in Illinois are completely out of control. Just as an example, we have over 8,000 units of local governments in Illinois. And let's talk about another state that has a ton, Massachusetts. I was just at the NASAC conference, which is the National Association of Accountants, Comptrollers, and Treasurers, talking with treasurers and comptrollers from across the country, looking for best practices and ideas of that sort for this office. And an interesting statistic that came up was Massachusetts, that has 800 local units of government. They think that's a ton. But as a matter of fact, they have more local units of government than all the Starbucks and McDonald's combined in the state of Massachusetts. But yet we have 8,000, more than 8,000 units of local government.
So what's your concern?
So I think that there's a symbiotic relationship between the state of Illinois and local units of government. And the comptroller's office, who does have the ability to audit, certainly in cases of malfeasance or suspected malfeasance, we have a tough job ahead of us. And so having strong internal controls in place, having the ability to oversee and provide that oversight of local municipalities or local units of government is critically important to managing the state in an effective and an efficient way. I have a history of doing that type of work in the city clerk's office. And for me, it's just, an exciting opportunity to run into the comptroller's office and on day one begin to sink my teeth into what's behind the curtains. Right now it's difficult. As Claire said, it's difficult to to tell you exactly what those numbers are or where the efficiencies can be found, because we're not behind the curtain. But if given an opportunity to pull that curtain back, I'm going to sink my teeth into that office the way I did in the city clerk's office. And I promise the people of the state of Illinois that they will have the best comptroller that has ever served them.
Can I jump in?
What's your hesitancy about combining comptroller treasurer?
Oh, I didn't say I was hesitant of it. I'm sorry.
Your survey did.
My who?
Your survey that you
So my survey said that I'm not a champion of it. I'm not like running out there saying we have to do it, because I think it's become more of a political point than an actual need for the state. I did say, well, let me finish. It's potentially and potentially not. So one could have argued that we were saving money by folding the city clerk's office into the mayor's office. Clearly, that's not the case. It's been a strong, independent advocate for people that has raised millions of dollars that would have never have come into the coffers had I not led that office. So the Office of the Comptroller was created to provide a checks and balance to the Office of the Treasurer, given the financial malfeasance that had happened back in the 50s. And so there is a purpose for the office, unless if anyone in this room believes that Illinois is no longer subject to corruption in office. You know, I tend to argue that that's not the case. And to have an independent watchdog, a fiscal watchdog that has strong controls in place, I think has a place in our society. Certainly has a place in the state of Illinois. And I believe that the Comptroller's office right now, as long as it exists, we need to make the most out of that office and actually have a real good return on investment for taxpayers versus just sitting around waiting for the legislature to take action, which, as we know, they're not prone to do very often.
So just on that point, the estimate is it'll save the state $12 million annually to combine the two offices. Most businesses, most companies today have a CFO, not two individual offices. These functions could easily be put under one constitutional officer or CFO type function. It saves the state money. It's something I think we ought to do. There was legislation put together on that. It passed unanimously through the Senate a couple of years ago. The speaker will not call it for a vote. It has to go through to get the legislature to get on the ballot to be voted on by the citizenry, so that we can amend our Constitution, and that's actually where it sits. And in the meantime, I've worked to reduce our expenses. And I think if people in the state thought that $12 million was a lot of money, thought we wouldn't have billions of dollars worth of bills right now that we cannot afford to pay. They don't think it's big enough.
I just wanted to make 2 points. First, I just wanted to say that the Office of the Auditor General is not independent up to the same standards that you would see in the private sector. And so I want to keep as many checks and balances in place as possible in order to make up for that. This is Illinois. We send our politicians to jail on a regular basis. But in regards to combining the two offices, Comptroller and the Treasurer's office, I'm against it from an accounting perspective. I'm against it because in a good accounting department, you segregate the functions of authorization from record keeping, from custody of assets. Treasurer has the custody of assets. It is written in our Constitution that the Treasurer is not allowed to accept funds until it's been recorded by the Comptroller's office. I think that's a really important check and balance. And the number quoted of $12 million savings, which, yes, it sounds great, but I have yet to see any detail on that. I went digging to try to find that detail. Right, oh yeah.
4 candidates who
Right.
ran for comptroller all supported letting the
And-
office. 59 senators voted
Yep.
for it. It has 70 or so sponsors in the House. I think there are 37 states that do not have separate offices.
There
So
are, but
somebody's
that's
doing
not
that.
quite true. I have looked at the offices of the Comptroller and the Treasurer in other states. I did a big analysis on it. These are my own numbers. But in looking it over, there are certain functions that were kept segregated in this state and that state. There were very few. I don't have it off the top of my head, but there were very few states that actually had one financial officer. And another reason that I wouldn't want to combine these roles is that I don't want to eliminate a vote for the people. The people deserve to elect as many of their state government employees as possible. And I think that when you combine that into one office, you're going to have some functionality that moves to another level, probably from somebody who's appointed. Again, that's my own opinion, though. But I don't want to see that vote of the people especially when you're dealing with our money, because there are so many checks and balances in place for people who are investing in publicly traded companies so that they can make the best, most well-informed decisions. as taxpayers, we don't have that. We don't have that level of comfort and level of trust that we can't just take our money and go somewhere else unless we want to leave the state.
Okay, the proposal was just to put it on the ballot, though.
Yeah.
Just so
I
that
would
it's
love an
way in.
opportunity to speak on this
Sure.
for 1 second. I very much support the idea of combining the office. But what we desperately would need in the state, because I think anybody who's been around Illinois knows everything is politics. If we're going to change it, we need an independent office of auditor. And what this institution would have to do is they would have to publish every month what goes in and what goes out. Plus, I would support hearings throughout the state, several times a year, where whoever works for the independent auditor's office should go out to the public. They should be asked questions. They should be entitled to get answers. If you want to talk about full disclosure, it shouldn't be kept in Springfield. You shouldn't have to be an accountant to understand who spends and who gets. So I support eliminating the office, but you have to have an office of an independent auditor that goes public. They publish everything. You can get it online. You can read it. You can download it. And in addition, several times a year, these people should go statewide so the people get an opportunity to talk to them about how their money is being spent.
Okay, I just want to address a couple of things, and then I want to see if reporters have questions, and then we've got to close. We're coming up on our hour. But to the issue, both of you, of being independent, you were appointed by the governor.
Yes.
You wouldn't have this position if
That's
not for
correct.
his appointment. And you've called Mike Madigan your mentor, Ed Burke, Ron Emanuel, very close to them. At one point, you did, show some independence, but at some point, they won you over because you are in their camps now. So I want you both to address your independence based on those factors.
So I was appointed by the governor, but honestly did not really know the governor prior to my appointment. I had put my credentials into the state to really see where I might help, and actually had hoped to maybe be chosen as a U of I trustee. And then suddenly Judy Bartopinka passed away, and I think they looked at my business experience and my history with social services and asked me to take the appointment. So I do not have a long record of history with the governor prior to my appointment. So I believe I was chosen because of my credentials to serve in this role. And as I mentioned earlier, since then, I have not walked in lockstep with the governor. I have agreed with him on some of the budget-related issues because I saw in my own business career, through businesses that I led, I believe that the only way that we are going to get out of the mess that we have financially in our state that has frankly been built over many, many years is to get our economy growing. We have got to have some changes in our state where we have revenue not only through tax increases, but through a growing economy where people are working. Some of the things the governor has proposed are things that would help the business community put people back to work. And on those items, I have agreed with him, not because he appointed me, but because I believe it from my own experience.
How much is he helping you in your reelection effort, and how much are your donors in sync?
So far, all the money that I've raised for this election, I've raised on my own through my own fundraising and my own personal contacts, reaching out to people. Not to say that I don't expect him to help at some point, but so far everything has been raised on my own. He has not directed donors to me.
What would you like me to answer specifically about that? Okay, so my independence. I would certainly not say that I'm in anyone's camp other than the camp of the people whose votes I seek to be in. My entire career, I've stood up to people within my own party, as I mentioned earlier, but I've also been able to work with them to move the ball forward. And I think that's what's sorely lacking in the state of Illinois right now. You're either on one side or the other side, and that's not how it should be. I can work with anyone, whether they're people that were enemies yesterday, they'll be allies in the future if it means working on an issue to get the ball moving forward. And I think that's what we need in Illinois government today, and we do not see much of. Everyone is so partisan. When I was in the legislature, you could talk to your colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle and make friends with them. Didn't mean you agreed with them every time ideologically or even most of the time, but every now and then when you had to sit down and actually get the job done for the people of Illinois, we would do that. Not everybody has that skill. That's something that I am particularly good at. And, you know, proof of that is, as I said, like people have invested, not just with votes, but even their money on both Democrats and Republican side of the aisle in support of my candidacy. Certainly we saw that when I ran for clerk. And so I'm looking forward to the opportunity to continue to prove that independence. And the fact that I can support Democrats for my own party is a good thing. And sometimes I'm going to have to stand up to them. And I've already proven that I'm willing to do that when it's necessary. But that is really what true independence is about. It's, yes, I'm a Democrat, but I'm not partisan. I like to get things done. And my history reflects one of being a hardworking individual who's never been handed anything in my life. I've never been appointed to anything. I've had to run. I ran against the establishment and won. And then I got reelected by the voters, not by the establishment, but by the voters.
So why do you consider Mike Madigan a mentor?
I consider lots of people mentors. My greatest mentors are my mom and dad, my brother, who's a Chicago police officer. Jesse White is a huge mentor of mine, so you should ask me about him. Ask me about Ann Pramaggiore. Those are the folks who are my mentors.
Like at inauguration ceremonies and such. Like,
Sure.
I mean, you have gone to bat for Mike Madigan. You sing his praises when you've introduced him at events like that.
And I've also stood up to the speaker. So if we're going to be fair about that, you know, again, I have a record of standing up and also supporting. And that's how you get things done. Nobody gets anything done by just throwing rocks at a house, right? You've got to actually be inside at the table and have a voice at the table. And I've been very good at doing that. And because I've been willing to stand up to elected leadership when other people have been afraid to do so, is that I've earned the respect of the people in high positions of power. I would say both adversaries and allies. And that's an important quality to have in an elected official, someone who's willing to stand up to their own party leaders. I have a proven history of doing that. She really doesn't, and I think it makes a difference. It makes a difference, and I hope that at the end of the day, the people of Illinois, just as they've accepted me for 6 terms as a state legislator and as the #1 vote getter in the city of Chicago over the last 2 election cycles, I believe that it's the people who understand the type of work ethic that I have that's on their behalf. I do have a life of public service. The best years of my life have been spent fighting on behalf of the people that I care about in this state. And I'm very proud of that. And I'm just asking them to give me the opportunity to run the comptroller's office in the way that I've run the city clerk's office, which is with strong controls in place, and certainly, as my colleague here to my left would say, with accounting principles in mind. That's what this office is about, but we also have the ability to prioritize, and that's an important asset to have right now.
Can I just say that her record does not show she stood up. Her record shows that she voted in lockstep with Speaker Madigan's unbalanced budgets, with the pension holidays. That's what it shows. You have not shown that in your time.
I have a record to speak to, which you don't know about because you've never had to actually vote for anything in your life. You have been appointed. I've been elected. So, I mean, I've been elected 8 times. How many have you?
Well, I wanted to add, like, do you just take issue with the whole, I mean, Judy Barger-Pinker passed away.
Yep,
The Constitution
unfortunately.
places the power of the governor to appoint. If there were a Democratic governor appointing a Democratic comptroller, would you have the same issue?
No, I wouldn't. I would have the issue with them not standing up to the current elected leadership that has yet to pass a budget or even present a budget for approval with the legislature. So that, I think, is the crux of the argument here, is that I have not seen anything from her other than championing Governor Rauner's agenda. When she herself calls herself his wingman on his budget, I'm going to believe her. So she said that. Those aren't my words. You called yourself his
I stand with the
wingman.
governor on some of the items that relate specifically to our opportunity to generate growth in our state.
And that has been pretty devastating, not just to social services, but to businesses across the state of Illinois.
I think this position of comptroller actually is one of the least partisan in the state, because it's really about good government. It's about good fiscal management of the state. It's about living within our means, about being fiscally responsible. I have worked across the board with people, regardless of their party, to help make sure payments owed were paid in as timely of a basis as we could make them given our cash constraints. I recently, in the last several weeks, worked with Mayor Emanuel on helping to make sure that Chicago Public Schools had the funding that they needed to be able to open on time, not just the general state aid payments, but the other payments that go to the state that normally would have been paid in September, that we pulled up and made all the payments to the schools around the state at the same time as we're required to, but to help the CPS open on time. I worked with Senator Donnie Trotter on helping to get funding once it was legally able, once we were able to do so, after it was passed by the legislature, to Chicago State University. We expedited those funds out and worked very closely with their administration to get them the money that they were owed so they could keep their doors open. Many of the social service providers are run by people who are Democrats, and I've worked with them hand in hand all year, ensuring that we get money to them on an expeditious basis so they can continue to do the work that they are trying to do.
Okay, let me see if anybody else at the table has a question.
I do. Comptroller Munger, earlier you said you disagreed with the governor on how he handled social service funding. What do you mean by that, and how would you do it differently?
So as I've already stated, and I don't know that I've gone through this in detail, but I have a long history helping intellectually and developmentally disabled. I've sat on our board of directors, actually. And from 2007 and 2009, when I was on the board of directors at the Riverside Foundation, the state was a year behind and $1 million in arrears paying us. I have personal experience of sitting on a board, having to take out loans, having to try to figure out how we're going to pay all of our bills, pay the bed tax the state charges us while the state owes us $1 million. That, by the way, was during the time when my opponent passed unbalanced budgets because they felt bad that we have to pay things that we didn't have the money actually. Money was promised but never could be paid. So as I've gone through some of the issues with social services, a number of them were not covered under any of the legislation, consent decrees, etc. I've been a vocal advocate. I have gone to the governor. I have gone to the governor's agencies. There's an organization, an agency in Centralia that helps people with severe disabilities, people who are wheelchair bound on feeding tubes, that were not actually getting the payments that they needed and were getting close to having to close. And the thought was, on some of the agencies, that those people would just move into less high level of care. It's called a SILA. I actually had to go to bat for them and say, the people, if they leave here, they're going into a nursing home, and it will be more expensive for us to care for them. So we worked through to ensure that the payments could be made.
But not in terms of prioritizing payments, but the governor himself has said he was opposed to several one-off bills Democrats have proposed to put funding forward for social service.
So the big reason the governor has vetoed those, and actually it gets down to the legislature has a history, and we heard it from my opponent, of passing bills and not funding them. And it does not help to promise anyone, organizations, businesses, etc., money when you do not have the money in the bank account to write the check. What it does is then they say, I have money from the state, I'm going to go spend that money, and now we owe them and we can't pay. It's better to be honest up front. So those are examples of things where actually they were unfunded bills.
And one other thing, you had said that you stand with the governor on certain parts of his agenda. Do you agree with him, though, that that agenda has to happen before there's a full year budget, or could those things wait and there be some sort of budget agreement and you revisit those items?
So let me just speak for a minute about the financial issues with getting a balanced budget, because really that's what we're constitutionally required to have in the state. We have general revenue in the state that is expected to be about $32 billion. We have expenses that are in excess of that, somewhere between $5 to $7 billion of the things that people want to be able to fund. We have $8 billion of bills right now in the state that we have no money to pay. We, to balance the budget, we cannot just simply raise taxes again 5%, as many suggest. For every 1% we raise our tax rate, we bring in $3.6 billion. We would have to take our tax rate from currently where it is at 3.75% up to about 8%. If we were just to pay down the backlog of bills we have, no one is going to vote for that. And if we did, I would challenge anyone to ask businesses, who is going to stay here for an 8% tax rate? So while we can look at, on the revenue side of the equation, at some kind of tax changes, we must couple that with reforms for business that will help reduce their costs, will help them put people back to work, expanding the tax base and growing our economy. There are two things actually out of the governor's turnaround agenda that actually relate directly to our ability to do that I've been supportive of, because I believe they are the only way we are going to be able to balance our budget. The first of those is getting reforms in our workers' comp insurance laws. I've been everywhere in the state. I have talked to businesses, schools, social service organizations, the state, municipalities. We all pay these high insurance rates. A typical claim in Illinois is about $30,000. A typical claim in California is $16,000. Our rates are way out of whack, and that money spent in insurance, it takes away from money that companies can go to fund jobs. I, for the life of me, cannot understand why we cannot get some common ground on that. It is a win-win. It takes costs out throughout the entire system. The second area I've been supportive in is looking for a way to freeze property taxes and hold the line on that. We have the highest property taxes in the country. When you look at the total tax burden on Illinoisans, it's extremely high, largely because of our high property taxes. I know the city of Chicago is dealing with looking at property tax raises now on top of it because we need more revenue. There are a lot of different ways that we can freeze property taxes and still give municipalities the flexibility they need to be able to manage their own budgets. One of the big areas the governor put on the table is right to work.
Do you agree that he should have held off on the budget in order to get some of those reforms? That, I think, was the question. Yes or no?
We have to pass a balanced budget. I don't know how you pass a balanced budget unless you literally cut social services completely, as an example, cut education. You cannot get to a balanced budget without a growing economy in our state right now.
So
We
you
cannot
believe
do
they're
it.
intertwined?
I think you have to do it. Just as an example, the things that are promised in are required under law are pensions. This year, our pension expense is going to be in the neighborhood of $8.5 to $9 billion out of $32 billion. It's approaching 30% of our state's budget. Our Medicaid bills are extremely high. Interest on the debt taken out when we borrowed against pensions is $1 billion, and we have another $1 billion in capital debt. You add it all up by the time you pay education, fund the public safety, fund pay salaries, and all the other things that are protected under law, there is not enough money left. You cannot cut enough to get to a balanced budget. So you need revenue, and you cannot raise revenue enough to get it balanced without a growing economy.
I have a flip side question, actually, for the clerk.
Okay.
Democrats then have been unwilling to participate in true negotiations with the governor on some of these reforms. Are there areas that Democrats should be willing to give in order to get to a budget agreement?
I think Democrats aren't willing to sacrifice hardworking men and women in this state, and the governor has made no qualms about his agenda in terms of eliminating organized labor in the state of Illinois, and has no desire to negotiate anything that would even remotely come to a consensus of, agreement with organized labor. Now, that's unacceptable to the core of who Democrats are. We also, I think it's important to acknowledge that Comptroller Munger has been on the record on multiple occasions supporting a 5%, the tax rate at 5%. Once
Coupled with,
we are at the very least are going to have a
Coupled.
tax increase in the short term to get out of this. Dan Proft interview. Munger acknowledges that a tax increase is necessary. The hole is too deep to fill without one.
coupled.
I think this is
Question was,
important.
What should, it may be, our time's really.
Okay, I'm sorry,
Answer the
but
question,
I'm going to
please.
answer the question because I think that goes to this.
Good,
I am
good.
for a progressive
We're out of
tax
time.
increase where she is for an increase at 5%. I think that hurts the
What
middle
should
class.
go-
I'm
That's
for a
not the role
tax
of
break for
comptroller.
99%.
You don't
There
get a
is or
vote on
isn't
that.
Well,
something
he asked
that-
about what we were
there
for with
is
the
or isn't-
turnaround agenda.
there
So
is or isn't
Monique, going back to your
something
question with
Democrats-
the turnaround agenda, correct? We are not willing to sacrifice hardworking men and women in the process of.
So that it's a no.
I do not believe in holding vulnerable populations hostage to the
Simple yes or no.
governor's agenda. I
You
don't
don't-
think it's a simple yes because we're at the
Well, these are
worst.
talking points. I'm trying to get past that to a simple.
So she was
Is
able
there
to explain
something
her
that-
position quite elaborately.
But
She
are
answered the
there
question
ways
that was asked
to
of her.
do some of these turnaround agenda items?
I think this is,
That
yes,
work
there
with
are.
some-
This is how you do
That
it.
doesn't do what you say, which
Yes,
is undermine.
yes.
Here's what you would do. They're great ideas. If he thinks they're great ideas, put them on the floor for a vote in both the House and the Senate. This is the first time in history that the budget has been held hostage for non-budget related items. That needs to stop. We should have a budget. The governor should propose his. The legislature should propose theirs. They're all adults. There will be increases in revenue that are necessary. There will also be cuts that are necessary. People need to look at every single program that has a line item attached to it and see what the return on investment is for taxpayers. And I think that it's very important to acknowledge that this is not just you hear that people say this is not a revenue problem, it's a spending problem. I think it's both. You need to acknowledge that this is both. We need to provide revenue enhancement, and I would suggest that a progressive tax, which gives a tax cut to 99% of the population, is much better than her proposal of a 5%, which would be a 33% increase for most of the middle class. Having said that, I also think that you need to look at every single program that we're looking to include in a budget and determine whether or not it should be there. That's the responsible budgeting process. And a budget is simply that, the beginning of the framework of how we prioritize the state. So let's get to work. Let's get to work. We shouldn't be in year 2 without a budget. And the governor has a responsibility of proposing a budget that is not one that is, only going to be talked about if it includes non-budgetary related things, which are the things that are part of the turnaround agenda.
I'd just like to remind everyone that the House failed to pass a budget at all this year.
So did the
no
governor.
budget
He
to
hasn't even
the
introduced a budget, and that's his responsibility
there was
as well.
nothing to react
If
to.
you introduce a budget, you can go on the Office of Budget Management.
Which is
and look at it,
very
find
bloated
out.
as well, right? So he talks about a
Well,
balanced
it was-
budget, and the governor
I'm sorry,
proposed one that was
so
about
I'm
4
going to
billion out of whack.
Can I just would like to close the loop on the question that you had, because it really relates to our ability to,
You know what, I'm sorry, we really have to,
Okay.
we're gonna do quick closing
Sorry.
statements, so if
Okay.
there's anything we didn't get to, and I know Tim can raise his hand, we started with Tim, we're gonna start with Claire. Please, a minute and a half.
So this is closing remarks?
Yeah, anything we didn't get to, or something you wanna us to know.
Okay.
It can be- But I'm starting on this side of the table, because I started with you initially.
Sure.
So again, my name is Claire Ball, and I'm a Libertarian candidate for Controller, and I want to bring an accounting mindset to the office. I think that budget talks, what you look at actual numbers, and those actual numbers need to be honest, timely, accurate, with any kind of backup documentation you would need. The Office of the Controller has been used as a political reward or a career stepping stone for the entirety of its existence, and that needs to end. That's one of the reasons why I'm running. I want to bring a financial mindset to the office. It is not a political office. It should not be. It's dealing with numbers. It's boring. It shouldn't be causing this much anxiety. So I hope that you will consider a third-party choice here, because I don't care what letter follows your name. If you're playing funny with our money, I'm going to call you out on it.
That's great.
Thank you.
I will close with this. I believe that the Office of the Comptroller should be a much more boring office. The Office of the City Clerk was a boring office, but to the extent that we could make it worthwhile for taxpayers, it's become that. But the office should not be political, but at the same time, it should serve as an advocate for fiscal responsibility. I don't believe that we have fiscal responsibility in place right now, and we don't have an independent checks and balance on the governor's office with how we are being fiscally irresponsible. When you have thousands of kids dropping out of college because they're not getting MAP grant funds, that's not fiscally responsible. Those kids are either going to go off to other colleges, or many of them will never even go and finish college. They'll go out of state. We lose the brain drain. We're actually losing professors right now who would rather have a non-tenured position out of state than a tenured position in the state of Illinois because of this fiscal crisis and the devastation that it's done to higher education across this state. When you have a comptroller who stays silent, which I think is probably my biggest problem here, is the silence that's coming out of the comptroller's office. When you have people in vulnerable universes being decimated, when you have mothers who are told that their children won't be eligible for daycare subsidies if they make more than $10,000 a year coming out of the governor's directive, and we have a comptroller who stays silent on that, that's a problem, because guess what? That's not fiscally responsible to have mothers actually exit the workforce to stay home and provide child care services to their children, which only puts those children even further behind. None of these actions that are resulting in a 2-year without a budget now are good for our bottom line. And when you talk to corporations across the city and across the state, they're not saying that their greatest concern is a tax base. They're saying their greatest concern is the instability and the fiscal instability that exists right now in the state of Illinois. So, to circle back, the Office of the Comptroller, like I said, should be putting strong controls in place. Strong controls, oversight, accountability, true transparency. People should know who's getting paid, when they're getting paid, in what order, so that we would know who was prioritized before those other groups of absolute need, like developmentally disabled seniors and children who need special needs. So that is the type of transparency that I will bring, and I hope that I get a chance to be your next comptroller.
Thank you. Thank you. Throughout my career, I've had to hire many people, and one of the things that I learned throughout that time is that the best predictor of future success is past performance. Our state is in a fiscal crisis. We have $8 billion of bills we have no money to pay. We have $115 billion and growing of unfunded pension liabilities. My opponent, Ms. Mendoza, has her fingerprints all over the very decisions that led us to this place. She claims to be independent, but she voted for every one of these things, and it's the reason why pensions right now are gobbling up almost 30% of our state's budget. She was a City of Chicago employee for 16 years. She was concurrently in the state legislature. She is a product of Springfield and of Chicago government, and because of that, she cannot be independent. She has an inherent conflict because she cannot stand up against the very things that have put us in the position today because she voted for all of them. As I've noted, I spent 25 years in the private sector. I'm new to state government, I'll admit that. But I also have a very strong record of community service. And that gives me a unique set of skills for this job. One who understands financial controls and the importance of budgets that are balanced, but also the understanding of how critical the nonprofit social service providers are and how critical the state is to funding them to help those in our state who are most vulnerable. And I have been a constant and vocal advocate for this. And all you need to do is look at the stack of press that I've had all around the state, constantly visiting. I have spoken out a lot. I have been on all these things. I have been a strong voice for taxpayers. I have prioritized payments to help people most in need. I have advocated over and over again for a balanced budget, for fiscal responsibility. I've warned of the problems. I'm here to serve. I'm not taking a pension or state health care. I'm just here as a citizen volunteer, and I believe I've earned your strong endorsement for the remaining 2 years of this term. Thank you.
Yeah, in closing, I would like to say that with all due respect, we witnessed some of the problems which unfortunately seem to be inherent in politics in this state, which is namely, you pay to play. I don't know if Ms. Bell gets any money. I know I don't get any money from corporations. I don't get any money from PACs. Part of the problem in this state is that instead of putting the voters first, which is what I did to get on the ballot, we have safe districts, and in order to run and to get elected in this state, you need to raise millions of dollars. There's something fundamentally wrong with the institution. So if you want business as usual, if you want to continue pay for play politics, you should vote for Leslie Munger or Susan Mendoza. But if you want independence, what I think we need to do from here is we ought to have debates around the state. We ought to have the League of Women Voters, which is a nonpartisan institution. I would challenge my opponents. We should have those debates throughout the state. We should not just talk about, the fact that there's a lack of money, but what the devil are we going to do about it? Because I refuse to accept the idea that nothing can be done. Ms. Mendoza has suggested progressive income tax, and I'm in favor of that. Requires a constitutional amendment. Financial transactions tax, which the Democratic legislature has refused to hold public hearings on for at least 6 years. Why don't we debate these things? Why doesn't the public get a chance to hear all of the ideas of the candidates? If we do that, I think they'd vote for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks all of you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.